Blake, how many skeletons do you have in your closet?
How many times have I told you skeletons go in a vat of acid and then the ocean, not your closet?
Welcome to the Church Gear Podcast, where we pull the tech out of the booth and onto the stage to share the most outlandish stories and hidden wisdom from the tech trenches. And now, here are your hosts.
I'm your host, Blake Hodges, a man who has watched enough Breaking Bad to know skeletons don't belong in your closet, and I'm here with my co-host who is now also a murder suspect, Toby Walters.
I'm a murder suspect?
Well, yeah, you're asking me about skeletons in the closet. What am I supposed to...
This is news to me. Blake, have we ever... I feel like we've mentioned on the podcast that I basically grew up next to Breaking Bad.
I thought you were about to say, have you ever buried a body or something?
Not that I'm aware of. So I grew up next to a meth lab. You remember this story?
I love this. Hey, rags to riches, man.
I know.
From meth lab to church gear.
That's right. So speaking of meth labs, no. Hard shift, but Charlie and I were out in Dallas-Fort Worth area this week. I assume there are meth labs out there. I did not visit any of those, but we got to visit some amazing churches.
Just keep going. Just keep going.
So the first church we went to, Shoreline City Church, and we've worked with them before. Their team is great, Lucas and David and Brexton. So they are doing, we started at their old church, and they said, some of the gear is here, but get a good look, because this is going to be torn down in the next 2 weeks. Like, it's going to be totally bulldozed and an apartment building built up. And they bought a new church building, which was actually an old church that was dying. It was really cool. Like, I love how kind of seeing God like restore older church buildings into new growing churches. Like there's always ministry happening and new things. But so Shoreline City is working with our friends at Summit Integrations, and they have some very fun toys going into their new auditorium, and everything's white. Like, they're doing the white vibe instead of like everything's black. So their ceiling is white. I can't remember if their floor was white, but like it's very bright and open in there. And Blake, I know none of this means anything to you, but they got a couple Quantum 338s that are going in. Who makes those?
Quantum.
Digico makes those. And they have lights that they said the manufacturer had to warn them that if you turn them up all the way and focus the beam, they can literally start a fire. It's like how kids magnify the sun.
I was about to say, are we going Sid with Toy Story here? Just going to light.
Exactly.
Hey, that person that told you it was too loud every week, we're going to light her on fire.
So, you got to be careful with those lights. Apparently, I didn't know lights could literally like start a fire that powerful.
Yeah, I mean AVL. It's an afterthought.
I know.
Afterthought shouldn't be that powerful.
Yeah, L is for light the fire, right? See, I'm very clever too. And then we also got to go over to Watermark. And Blake, I got to take you to Watermark Church sometime. I call it the Google campus of churches.
Oh, so it's nice.
It is so cool. And they have a coffee shop, which is kind of like indoor and outdoor. And I mean, there were probably 150 people just at the coffee shop. It's open to the public. People come like all day, every day, and they have this incredible like indoor playground thing. So there's families there. And again, we've worked with Watermark before, and great team over there. We got to hang out with Hudson and Daniel, but Charlie had never gotten the tour there. And they had also recently put in an LED wall.
Oh, I know what that is.
So this is the second largest LED I've ever seen in person.
What was the first?
The first was at the Sight and Sound Theater in Branson, Missouri. Theirs is 1,200 panels. And I asked Hudson, how many panels is this wall? And it goes like the entire width of their stage. If you see their stage, like it is incredibly huge. And he didn't know how many panels, but it is 26,000 pounds.
Dude, that is almost as much as I eat of white cheddar popcorn a year. That is incredible.
Say, like, do you have some reference to, you can imagine 26,000 pounds. So I guess, yes, white cheddar popcorn. And so as every church has, it's kind of, most churches call it their graveyard, just their gear storage where they have all their old gear. And so we're walking through there, and we notice an item on the top shelf, and Hudson was like, oh yeah, we still have that. And Charlie's like, oh man, I totally forgot to grab that last time. And I said, wait a second, we can have that? And Hudson was like, yes, you can have it. So I'm like, Charlie, we're going to grab that thing. So we go over and climb up to the top shelf and we grab the leg lamp from A Christmas Story.
Oh my goodness. I know that reference.
And so we pull down this leg lamp and I hand it to Charlie and he's carrying it around and we're still kind of like backstage, but we have to walk back out of the auditorium into the coffee shop with like hundreds of people. And so Charlie's kind of like, I don't really want to carry this leg lamp around. It feels a little awkward. And I was like, oh, okay, I'll carry it around. I have no shame. So I'm walking around with the guys with this leg lamp and people are just like, they're seeing it. I can hear them chuckling and starting to make comments. And one person's like, what are you carrying around for? And I'm like, oh, it's leg day.
Please tell me that is, look, no one's calling dibs on that here. I'm calling dibs on it for the Church Gear office during Christmas.
No, Jared called dibs on it for the Church Gear office, but then I think it was Edwin said it's going in the tech shop, and then Chris is like, no, that's going in shipping. So it is being currently fought over by the entire Church Gear team.
Let's make that a Christmas trophy. Instead, if you are the best department each week or whatever, you get the leg lamp. That's amazing. Well, speaking of someone that's got amazing legs that light up for days, and to introduce him, this is a quote from him, the man himself, lighting designer, production designer, one of those things, and he moonlights as a male model, Tony Fransen. Tony, welcome to the Church Gear Podcast.
That's really funny. Thanks. I'm so happy to be here.
Tony,
and I'm sorry it's taken us so long to finally do this.
Oh, you're good.
Have you ever done a lighting design involving a leg lamp?
No, but I mean, I feel like that needs to happen.
It was great because
I think
the next day I went over to Gateway Church in Southlake and they had seen the social post with the leg lamp and they said, we have a leg lamp too. Apparently it's like churches in Texas keep using it as a sermon prop is what it was.
Oh my gosh. That's really funny. Yeah, I don't even know. I may have seen one in person at one point in my life, but like really, just on the Christmas Story. I think that's the only time that I can really imagine it.
Now that
they're awesome, though.
Now that we mention it, I'm pretty sure Fellowship has a leg lamp. I remember that now. It's like itching the back of my mind. That came up during one of the sermon series as a prop. That's amazing.
I could totally see one floating around Central in Vegas too. Like it's like almost guaranteed.
Yeah.
Okay, if you're listening
Shout out
to
Adam Taylor.
Yeah.
If you're listening to this and your church has a leg lamp, take a picture of it, post it, tag us. We will repost it.
Yeah, this is amazing.
All right, Tony, let's do your 5 truths and a lie and see if you can stump us. Number 1, once worked for Prince.
Who's Prince, Blake?
He is a R&B singer. No?
I mean,
pop singer?
Pop, yeah.
See, Pop kind of gets crapped on. I thought he was a little more like refined than Pop.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, moving on.
If you asked him, he definitely was.
Definitely was Pop?
Yeah. Okay. No, he's definitely more refined.
Yes. Number 2, once threw up on a bus due to too many tequilas. This is my kind of guy. Number 3, once rigged 27 one-ton motor points by myself.
That sounds like something a production guy would try, but it also sounds extremely dangerous or exhausting.
Me, Jared, and Edwin were getting some burgers the other night, and we ran into some people who were doing rigging for the Country Music Hall of Fame, and they were telling us how there were non-union folks and how they were behaving, and it sounded so scary.
Yeah, that's why they use union folks.
And, yeah.
And why was I not invited to this burger venture?
This might have happened.
Was it after 8 p.m.? Is that why?
All I will say, so that we don't get in trouble, is it was substantially past your bedtime.
Oh, okay.
Substantially. Number 4, once had a private party at the top of the Empire State Building.
Dang. Like his own private party?
No way. He's doing the lights for it.
Maybe.
Number 5, jumped in a lake and broke my neck.
I've heard of people like breaking their back before and then they heal and walk around, but I've never heard of somebody breaking their neck and healing and walking around. All right, Blake, I'm going to let you go first this time.
I'm going to lock in the tequilas.
Okay. I'm going to say that he never had a private party on top of the Empire State Building.
All right, Tony, we're locked in. Toby's got Empire State Building and I got tequila. What's the lie?
Okay. You sure you guys are sticking to these answers, right?
Yep, we can't change. We locked in.
All right, got it. Well, So you said, what was it again? You said that I didn't do the tequilas?
I'm saying you didn't do the tequilas. Toby's saying you did not do the private party on the Empire State Building.
Oh, man. Okay. So I definitely did both of those. Oh. And I'm definitely not a rigger.
Oh. So, Blake, you and I both lost.
If I gave the gag.
But that's good for me because I'm so far ahead of you. As long as you don't get any points, I'm going to win this year out.
Yeah, if it would take either the guest or me winning out, I think, at this point.
Okay, so Prince. I mean, Blake, could you name a single song by Prince?
Purple Rain?
Oh, man, well done.
Yes, I knew it. I had a 50-50 shot. It was him or Queen. Are you old enough to have worked for Prince? Is Prince still alive?
Yeah, well, I'm 42. I'm 42. Prince died the year, I think he died shortly after I left. So it was like, I don't know, 6 months.
Is that because you killed him?
No, unfortunately, he was in fairly, what was funny about Prince is he never really let on that he was dealing with this problem. And it all came out after the fact when they found him in an elevator and he like died of an overdose and all that. But like, he never really let on except for that he had these sort of wild mood swings. And so that was maybe a little bit of a memory for me after the fact, after he passed away, because, he was staunchly religious. I believe he was a Jehovah's Witness, and it really wouldn't let anybody curse. He wouldn't let anybody eat meat at the property when you were out there rehearsing and things. Like no one was able to eat meat. He's like a staunch, not that has anything to do with religion, but it has everything to do with, he was like a vegan. And so everything he cared about, he was like very direct about, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
He was Jehovah's Witness? I'm shocked.
Yeah. Yeah. And he was real into it too. Like one of the last rehearsals we did, we were rehearsing a Nicole Nordeman song. Like he was really into Christian music, like really loved it. And he just had this very strong, he had very, very strong views on things. And so when I found out that he had passed away because of, a drug overdose, I was shocked actually, because he was just not that guy. He's not the guy you'd imagine to die of an overdose,
Yeah.
He was just a very clean cut, very sharp dresser, just cared about musicianship. Like he was so into music. That was his only thing. Like he just cared about it with all his heart. And he liked to surprise people, and he liked to kind of catch you off guard a little bit,
It is weird that we lose so many of our great creatives to untimely deaths. It's sad how they run together.
Yep.
I agree. I totally agree.
So what's it like to have a private party on the top of the Empire State Building? And was this like your birthday party or something?
This is another random one. So me and a friend of mine, do you guys know Darian Coop? Have you ever met him?
I don't think so.
He's like a lighting designer, programmer kind of guy. Anyway, this was years ago. We used to work together when I was much, much younger. And I got called by a very famous lighting designer called Mark Brickman. He used to do all Pink Floyd stuff, right? Like this very well-known designer in our lighting world. And he was like one of the first guys, he once told me, he goes, my claim to fame is that whenever I lit the Olympics, I was the first person to ask them to shut off the house lights. He lit the opening ceremony of the Olympics, and he asked them to shut off the house lights. And that was like groundbreaking at that time. So that's really cool. Anyway,
seems pretty standard.
Short story about Mark Brickman.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly. But if you hadn't done it, and then you finally, the guy comes in and goes, I've got an idea. Let's shut the house lights off and just use moving lights or whatever.
Yeah.
I mean, what a, anyway, so Mark became the lighting designer to sort of oversee the lighting at the top of the Empire State Building. This was back in 2012, a long time ago. And he was looking for a programmer that could kind of come in and just sort of help him create his vision up there. And we had worked together on a project previous to that. And he called me and he goes, hey, do you want to go up there? So, because I'm working on a really big project, is how he said it, And I was like, okay, cool, let's go. And so we went up there, we programmed for like 2 weeks. We're on 72, which is, if you're looking at the Empire State Building, it kind of goes up and then it cuts in. It's that first cut in where 72 is. And so we're on 72 and we're there for 2 weeks and we're working our butts off. Anyway, end of the second week comes around. We do the show, goes great. Well, they had given us a key to the building. Literally, I still have it somewhere. I don't know where it is, but they gave us a key to the Empire State Building. And so show goes down. I just tried my luck the next night and I called some friends that I knew in New York and I was like, hey, you guys want to go up and like have some pizzas and beers at the top of the Empire State Building? And they were like, oh, heck yeah. Do you think you can actually work that out? And I was like, I think so. I have a key and security knows me at this point because I've been in and out of there all week or for the last 2 weeks. I said, I think we're good. And so we all just went up to this vacant floor on 72, which, by the way, has no gates, has no protection from falling off the edge. Like you can literally open the windows and go out on the ledge and it's totally fine. and it's just a row of lights, basically just a row of LED lights all the way around that floor.
Wow.
And then it's the open air.
Yeah.
And so we went up there and we had pizzas and beers the night after we did the show at Empire State Building. And it was such a blast.
If Homeland Security shows up after this episode airs, I apologize for that.
I haven't really ever told that story in public, so you guys are getting a good one.
Perfect. And speaking of how in the world did you break your neck and now you're walking around and moving? Like, how does that work?
So that was actually the year after that. I was traveling around with a band and we had a day off in, where were we? North Carolina somewhere, not Charlotte. What's the
Raleigh?
What's the city with two? Yeah. Raleigh, Durham. That one. Yeah. I was in Raleigh. Okay. So we were in Raleigh and I used to enjoy traveling a lot. And so I was like, hey, let's get out and let's get a boat on the day off. Let's get like a pontoon boat. Just go out for the day, get the crew together, everybody go hang out. So like probably five. I think it was like 4 or 5 of us went out. Anyway, we're cruising around the lake and having a great day, blah, 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 blah. We're on our way back in. And I just decide, like a total knucklehead, to just dive in one more time. But we had gone in a ways and it was a very dark lake. And we were in the middle of the lake. It didn't look like we were in a shallow water area, but it happened to be like kind of where boats kind of come in to like dock up. And that area was just all it was like literally 4 feet deep. I had no idea. And I just jumped over. I ran from one side of the pontoon to the other. I jumped over and man, life-changing event right then. Wow. Just completely changed the whole trajectory of my entire life right there. Broke my neck and had to go off tour and sit out for 3 months. And then from then on, a number of things happened after that just totally changed my life. But pretty insane moment.
How did you not drown with a broken neck in the water? Did someone jump in and save you?
So when I hit the top of my crown right here, and I felt it like shoot down the back of my neck, and I grabbed my neck and like held it underwater, and then kind of rolled back, stood up. I could stand. It hurt, but I was more sort of in shock, I think. And I said to everybody on the boat, I was like, guys, I'm really hurt. I'm really, really, really hurt. And they like helped me get in the boat very carefully and uncomfortably. And like, then I laid down. And then that's when I knew it was really bad, because when I lay down, I was going to have a hard time getting back up. Somehow I got back up, went to the tour bus. This is insane, actually. Went to the tour bus all while holding my own head. And when you're traveling, when you're touring, it's kind of a weird thing. Like you're with people and you think everybody, like they're your family, but like you really don't know everyone that well. You're just touring. You know what I mean? Everybody's there to do their job. All of a sudden you're like, okay, I need to go to the hospital. they're not really your family. They're just like people you've met in the weeks prior. Like, that's it.
Yeah.
And so here we are, and we're headed off to some hospital. We ended up back at the hotel in the tour bus. And then I got off the tour bus. I literally did way too much walking, got into a van, and then the van took us to the hospital. The hospital didn't want to see me because they didn't have the equipment to treat me. So they put me then in an ambulance, and the ambulance drove me across town to the main hospital where they could actually like work on me. It was like a whole thing.
Golly.
But I walked into the front desk of the hospital, and I was like, y'all, I need help now. Like, please help me. And they were like, sir, what's happening? I said, I think I don't know. I've done something to I think I broke my neck. Maybe, I'm not sure. Anyway, I wasn't sure.
Wow.
Bottom line, doctor comes in that night. We're like finally kind of gone through the ER and all that. He's like, listen, you don't know how lucky you are to be alive. And he goes, I'm going to tell you something. You need to listen to me for the next 2 weeks. He goes, don't do anything unless I tell you. He's like, this is very, very important. He's like, you may not walk again if you don't pay attention to what I'm telling you. And I was like, okay, here we go.
Wow.
I had no idea. And so it's like just that life changing, like, okay, now I've got to completely change everything for a little bit. Yeah. And so I went from being like gangbusters touring to like slowing way down. And I had kind of just been going at a very strong pace up until that point.
A breakneck pace, Toby. How could you? I'm never jumping in the lake again. I recently did it. Nathan's birthday. It's the same thing. Karen and Nathan's birthday, and I was jumping in the lake, and so this is so scary.
Blake, you realize you were with a lighting designer.
I was.
Nathan.
Yeah. Oh, you might know him actually.
Yeah, Nate Alves.
Who?
Nathan Alves.
Oh yeah, I love Nate Alves.
Yeah, so I was jumping in the pool on the second story. God, this is so scary. Not the pool, the lake. Okay, well, to rewind back before you broke your neck, when you were accelerating up into the breakneck pace, tell us about like your tech background. You seem to have done very well for yourself. You've done, let's see here, from nothing to then lighting creatives for the likes of Brandon Lake, Phil Wickham, One Republic. One Republic is my favorite band of all time. Like, how did all this happen?
I mean, it's been a wild ride. My parents, I'll try to give you the short version, but my parents had a ministry. I grew up traveling around the world with them. They put on plays, was how they kind of got going. Actually, my parents started out singing. My mom would sing and my dad would preach. This is when I was real young. They would do about 200 cities a year, which was absolutely insane.
Wow.
And I did that from, I was traveling with my folks from the time I was 4 until the time I was about, I don't know, I guess we were 10. And then my dad decided to kind of get into dramatic ministry. And so then we started doing all these plays. And this is all through the like 80s, 90s, I guess you could say. Mm-hmm. And then come late 90s, I started getting really into concerts. And, I think one of my first concerts was Carmen, actually, kind of growing up in a ministry home like
Classic.
That, you get to go see Carmen at the arena, you know what I mean? And so we went and, the first time I saw the Carmen play, I was so taken back by the lighting. And I was like, man, he had Very Lights. He had like the original like VL2s and that kind of stuff out there. And I was like, man, and I didn't know what that was at the time, but I just remember looking and watching the show and going, man, the lighting is so cool. I want to do lights. Like I want to do lights for live shows. That's cool. I wonder how you get into this. And I don't know if you guys ever remember a magazine called Lighting Dimensions magazine.
Definitely not.
Toby read the Gear magazine on what he could buy gear for as a child.
I was in like Mix magazine. I was an audio guy.
Yeah. So Mix, and then kind of the counterpart to Mix was Lighting Dimensions, right? And they'd go out and they'd interview lighting designers that did, incredible stuff like Elton John, like go down the list, all these massive shows.
Yeah.
Rolling Stones, Tina Turner, Madonna. And so they're like interviewing all these guys. And I'm like, I don't know, 13, 14 years old. And my dad had subscribed to this magazine because he was always like trying to research like lighting for his plays and stuff. All the while, I'm like getting an education from this because they're interviewing all the top designers in the country. And I'm just learning about what the lingo is, what the language is, the language of the business, I guess you could say. And also looking at all these shows, and they used to publish the lighting plots. That was the coolest part of it. They would publish the plot in the magazine. And so you could look at everybody's plots and like see what they did along with the gear list. And that just started this journey for me of wanting to do lighting. And eventually we moved to Nashville, I think in 99. And I had met some guys, shout out to Drew Baca. He probably won't be watching this, but Drew Baca was a lighting designer who worked for this band called Audio Adrenaline. They were a Christian band back in the 90s.
They got a big house.
We know that name.
Yeah, the big house, right. And because of my interest in Vari-Lite, this is another weird one. When I was like 15, I called the Dallas Vari-Lite home office, which at that time was called VLPS, Vari-Lite Production Services. And they provided Vari-Lites for everybody's shows back in the 90s, right? I cold called them when I was 15 and said, hey, I want to get a quote on doing Vari-Lites on our play, for our play. And I'm interested in renting 30 Vari-Lites. Could somebody send me a quote? And the next thing you know, I get this guy, Gary Carnes, calling me, and he's like legendary, like account rep at Vari-Lite. And I didn't know that at the time, but he like worked with everybody. And he calls me and he's like, hey man, I hear you want some Vari-Lites on your show. Now they're very expensive. We need to talk about that, like
they're
right out of the gate.
Expensive.
Yep.
Yeah, very expensive. And I said, okay, I understand, but I'm just interested in the cost and interested in what's involved in trying to bring them in to do an event. Like, I just want to know. And 15. And he takes me seriously. He didn't know my age. I always had that deep voice, so I think I just pulled it off or something. But like, anyway, he sends me a quote, and the next thing you know, I'm like begging my dad to like use Vari-Lites on our play. And we had a video shoot coming up. Actually at Lakewood Church in Houston.
Oh yeah.
And this is back at the old building before they were in the arena. And my dad bit and he did it. And we got to bring him in, and that in came a programmer and an artisan console, which was the big, original kind of real moving light desk before there were hogs and all that stuff. And that's I guess that was the very beginning. They'd asked me for a lighting plot, and I had been studying Lighting Dimensions magazine. And I literally drew up a plot. I kind of sketched out the stage, and I drew up a plot using these little stencils that they had sent me. And I like stenciled in where I wanted all the lights to go. And I was like, I think this will work. And I sent it over to faxed it to Vari-Lite.
Love it.
And they did it. They freaking did it. And we did it. We did the show, and it was insane. I knew what I wanted. I'd been thinking about it for a long time. I knew how all the lights were going to fit into the play. And the next thing you know, we're doing it. So that was the beginning. Anyway, I'm through Gary at Vari-Lite. I met this guy, Drew Baca, who does Audio A. And then that led to Andy Dunning, who did DC Talk at the time. Mm-hmm. Another lady named Valerie Groth, who worked for this company called, I think it was Light and Sound Design. And she was Carmen's lighting designer. She was also an account rep at Light and Sound Design back in the day. And I just began to like network with these people in Nashville as a kid.
Yeah.
I was like 16, 17 years old at this point. And we just became friends and, acquaintances. We started showing up at shows. Hey, how can I help? My first programming job was for free for Drew. He called me up and he's like, hey man, I could pitch you, or it might not have been completely for free. He was like, I can pitch you $100 if you'll set up my hog file for me. And I was like, heck yeah. So I got in there and built all his presets and palettes for him. And, came to rehearsals with the floppy disk in my hand. Yeah. And I was like, here you go. I got it. Plug it in. And that was my first chance at getting to do anything in our business, know? And then one thing leads to another. And the next thing you know, you're starting to program for people, because when I was a kid, I worked really hard at being fast. That was the whole thing.
So then how'd you end up with One Republic then? It sounds like you really networked and you learned early, you networked early. So that makes sense why you're so successful at 32? So how did you end up with One Republic?
42. 42.
Still more successful than most 42-year-olds. How did you end up with One Republic then in that storyline?
Yeah, so that was a funny one. So years and years ago, I was working for another fairly well-known artist, and the rigor of all people, and I hit it off, became friends. And he, fast forward 10 years, became a production manager and a tour coordinator. And he calls me up out of the blue near the end of the pandemic there. And as you guys all know, a lot of people exited our industry during that time. So I'm really just I just got to light them by default, probably. I'm still in the game, right? But he calls me up out of the blue and he goes, "Hey man, we're putting together One R's next tour. Would you be interested in flying out to meet the band? And maybe we can just talk about what the year will look like and then what the design will be and blah, blah, blah." And they had just gone through a couple of personnel changes. And so I was like, okay, yeah, absolutely. I'd love to go meet. And so I flew to Palm Springs, and they were doing a one-off on the side. This was the coolest one-off, weirdest one-off, actually. It was beside a little man-made pond that was in this extremely luxurious, mansion. And it had all these little villas all the way around it. It was just gorgeous. And there's all these people just laying around sunbathing all day, just hanging out.
Tony, are you sure this wasn't an event for a cult leader?
No, it might be. I mean, the guys, it was some kind of birthday, I think. And they had a lot of money. I think it was I don't know who they were. So I hate to say all this, but
they had One Republic money.
They had a lot of money, and they hired One Republic to come play their party. Right. And so the guys were there, and I think it was just a fun gig to do for them. And they're, probably picking up a big wad of cash for the night or whatever. And that was my night to go meet them. So I ran lights for them at this little private party. It was nothing. It's 20 LED strips and a couple of wash lights. And that was the gig, right? Really simple.
Yeah.
And I just had fun with it. I wasn't trying to impress anybody. I was listen, we're at a private in Palm Springs. This is crazy.
Sorry, you go.
No, you go.
I was going to say, was that stressful coming into a situation where you do want them to like it, so they'll hire you with just, you got what you got, you had the lights available to you?
Yeah, and that's kind of how I rolled with it. I really didn't even get to advance it. It was sort of just this very minimally put together thing, right? They barely had the audio requirements covered for the band. So it was I'm not going to try to steamroll in and be I need, 10,000 lights and all this stuff. No, you just kind of roll in, deal with what's there, and try to make it look good and get through the night, Anyway, so we did that, met them immediately, just really dug them as guys. And I was man, this would be really cool. And Brody Harper, who is their creative director, he's with 272 out of Nashville. He's a great dude. Anyway, we hit it off. I ended up flying to Europe, did the design, did all the plots, got the show together, went to Europe. We did rehearsals. Next thing you know, the tour goes out on the road. It was a really cool thing. Really enjoyed it.
Yeah,
it was
that's awesome.
It was very fast paced. We had to knock it out right then and there. I think I had from the time I met them to the time we were in Europe, I think was right at a month, maybe. It was go time.
Yeah.
And so in that time, we had to basically get the design together, renderings, the whole thing. We had minimal time to do any of this. And then it was okay, go to Europe, get to work. And for me at that time, this was 3 years ago or whatever, I was so thankful just to be getting back on the horse and working again.
Yeah.
Because we had just come through this dead season. We were all doing whatever we can to make money. And like, I was fine. Like my wife has a great situation, and, I have a lot of irons in the fire with different things. So like I was totally fine, but still I love what I do. And so I just wanted to get back to work. That's not everyone's story. A lot of people did not have other irons in the fire, and they were completely up the creek. And so the end of pandemic, I mean, I was really thankful just to be doing what I love again,
Yeah, that's awesome.
So, anyway,
very cool.
Wow.
Okay, Tony. So I was standing in church just last week, and I have a lighting designer question for you. As I'm standing there and worship is happening, I'm engaged in the worship, and then as I turn my head and look at the audience, it's like, you look at the stage and all the lighting design, the visuals and the sounds coming from the speakers, and it's like, it's very engaging. And then you turn your head and look at the audience, and it's like, oh, it's like the magic is off. It's like kind of like the fourth wall is broken, that whole concept. So is there a way as a lighting designer, as a creative director, to draw the audience in with, I don't know, lights in the audience? Or how do you, keep it from it's completely separated between audience and stage and engage them more? Does that make sense?
Well, so I've been kind of tackling that issue kind of in the worship space a little bit, because I worked with a number of different worship artists, and which I absolutely love. I think it's such a cool vein in the music industry. But I think the issue that I've kind of come up against is that there's you're right, there can be a lot of separation. And to me, a worship leader should be leading the people, not performing for the people necessarily. I think there's an element of performance to it, but I think that they should be sort of in and among them, if that makes sense. In and among, and everybody becomes family, and we all kind of go to one place together, And so I've been kind of trying my hand at creating stages, and I get to do a little more production design when I do a lot of worship folks, when I work with worship folks. And so I've been trying my hand at creating, long runways that end up out there, or shapes that sort of get away from the rectangle at the end of the room.
Yeah.
And I've been kind of enjoying that. I think it's a different approach, and it kind of gets the worship leader in the crowd instead of the worship leader at the end of the arena or the end of the venue.
Yeah.
And I kind of dig that. I know that's a subtle thing to mention, but
that's usually not something that churches can pull off.
Yeah. I mean, maybe not. I mean, I know a lot of churches were built traditionally where they're kind of at one end, and that is kind of what it is. I think we need to, in church, I have lots of feelings about church lighting, and
give us some. This is your moment.
No, I don't know that it's my moment. I think that we need to be thinking as tastefully as possible in church. And I think that preparation, and there's a lot of reasons. And I've been spending a lot of time around buddies that work in the church. One of my dear friends, Alex Fuller. I don't know if you guys know him or not, but
oh yeah, we had him on the podcast.
Oh, cool. Yeah. No, he's like one of my bros, but, another great one, Daniel Cannell,
we've also had him on the podcast.
Work.
Yeah.
Yeah. Daniel's another longtime friend. We've known each other for over 20 years. And it's just sort of one of those things where it's like, I don't know that we need to be dumping hordes of cash into renting gear and doing all that. Like we need to be aware of how we're using the church's money. And we need to be thinking in terms of how do we build a sustainable and yet impactful experience for people. And I think in the last 10 years, I think we've seen the church go really heavy into production. And now we're starting to see the whiplash of that a little bit, where people are tired, they're burned out, they've quit, there's just a whole long list of things. Right. And I think now we need to sort of recircle and go, okay, how do we how do we build church sustainably? How do we build production for church sustainably?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that there's a lot more design that goes into that than what the average tech director probably thinks about. I think it's a complex issue, and I don't think it can be answered in probably just this interview.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot to it.
And
anyway,
you go to, church production, church tech conferences, you end up teaching at these things. What are some of those like common things you keep coming back to when you're teaching church techs and creatives about just how to be better at what they do?
I think the thing that I've been hearing a lot, and if you want me to be really real, the thing I've been hearing a lot about is burnout.
Yeah.
And I think I've also been hearing a lot about communication being a problem with their leadership. And I'm not pointing at any of the people I just spoke about. I'm talking about technicians in general out there in the world.
Sure.
And I think that there's a certain set of people skills that goes into dealing with a pastor. I think that's not always the easiest role to be a church tech person. I think that church tech has become a combination of live concert and corporate event, right? Mm-hmm. And you can think of your pastor as sort of like a CEO who comes in on a Sunday, and if you're really lucky, he's a really prepared CEO, and he's forwarded you his information.
I wouldn't know what a prepared CEO is like.
You're fired, Bob.
Right? But most of them aren't, and the reason they aren't is because they're critiquing their information flow right up until the moment they deliver it to the live audience.
Yeah.
And so they're very introspective, and I know how I am when I'm presenting a design to an artist. I'm very introspective and very careful and protective of it because I know it's going to be scrutinized heavily in the next 4 hours after I show it to them.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's hard. And I think I can relate to pastors in that I think that they're having to kind of come up with this thing every single week, and it's not an easy job. And they got to keep getting better and better and better and better at it. Most pastors don't realize how hard the technician's job is. And so there's this giant disconnect between these two personality types where you got, somebody who's maybe not as good at communication, but very good technically. And then you've got the great communicator that thinks it should all be done already.
Yeah.
So we've got these two totally polar opposite personality styles. And I think that's leaving a huge gap for maybe some teaching, maybe some some upbringing, I guess it would be another way to say it, a way to teach people how to grow and communicate. But I don't think it's a one way. I don't think I can come in and just teach the technician how to fix it. I think there needs to be some conversation with church leadership. I really do. I think the expectations have become way too high with the amount of technology we're dealing with these days.
Yeah.
It's gone from, flatline, the house lights and the PA to now we're dealing with, say an average mega church probably has 40, 50 moving lights. A small church might have 10,
mm-hmm.
If you're talking about your life church kind of size buildings, probably 10, 12 moving lights and a front wash. And, there's just a lot of technical know-how that needs to happen in order to pull all this off now. Talking about LED walls. You guys were mentioning that at the beginning, LED walls. I know about those. Having to make how to make all that connect and work right is not easy. Yet we still have the same expectation that we did 15 to 20 years ago, where the pastor thinks it all should just be able to happen. I should be able to have my slide up there now. Why can't I have that?
Yeah.
And I think there's more to it sometimes. Not always, and I'm not as easy on technicians who know what they're doing. If you know what you're doing, just get it done. Let's go. But when you're dealing with volunteers and people who are needing help. I mean, gosh, man, there needs to be like a course in there somewhere that's teaching both sides.
Yeah.
You know?
So speaking of something that everybody's dealing with right now in pastors' expectations, a huge Christmas production is coming very quickly for most of our church tech leaders that their pastors have, said, okay, I envision this and this and this, and we're going to have, swinging acrobats and animals and, everything imaginable. Do you have a bit of advice or wisdom to pass down to our church techs that feel completely overwhelmed by that level of vision and expectation right now leading up to Christmas?
I do. I'm actually working on one myself right now. There's a church that I work with regularly that has asked me to put together a design for their Christmas event. I think the conversation is, are we doing what's right for our staff? I think this goes all the way back to what I was just mentioning a minute ago. Like, are we driving our people into the ground at the most important family holiday of the year? Or are we helping them get through this season the best way that we can? And, we do need to minister to people around this time of year. I mean, Jesus came and was born, and this is a beautiful time of year. But how hard is it to actually pull off the grandiose vision that we have and still keep our people healthy? I think there needs to be a lot more talk about the health of the church staff around Christmas and Easter, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
Because we put so much emphasis on it. But most church staffs are not just doing Christmas and Easter. They're doing Christmas, Easter, the flip in January. They're jumping into the conference in February. They're jumping into this and the women's thing and the kids thing and this, and the staff is having to do it all. And it's a lot, that's a lot. I mean, if I'm lucky, I'm doing 8 shows a year, 8 big, maybe 10 decent sized big shows a year. That takes every ounce of energy I've got to do all that.
Yeah.
Okay. And they're actually being asked to put on a weekly show plus produce all these other events all throughout the year. It's insane.
Yeah.
I was just about to say, I've got great empathy for them after we did a podcast planning session for 2024. And it was like, let's do 3 to 4 series while also doing the podcast weekly. And my boss was like, you're going to have to plan these big series as you're doing weekly shows. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's a lot to do. And yeah, church techs have much greater scale than that. So that does sound very tiresome. Tony, you've done this for a while. You've seen a lot of things. I'm going to guess that you've seen a disaster at some point in church tech or on a tour or whatever. So give me a disaster story that people can, get some laughs at, maybe have some empathy for their fellows who have also gone through the same rough spell.
Yeah. Well, I've got 2. Can I tell 2? I've got one other one that we talked about one before the show, but I'll tell you one other one that was kind of like wild. I guess, I'm going to go back to 2010. This is quite a while ago. I was working with a church down in Texas, and we were putting on a very big Christmas pageant, we'll call it. Just kind of your classic, like with the choir, 150 voice choir, like, all these different scenes and all these different things, the wise men coming in, all this stuff. Anyway, they had brought in an elephant to ride one of the wise men in.
Were there elephants in the, in Israel at that time? It seems like the wrong part of the world.
I have no idea.
No one wanted to ask that question, though. It was quite the elephant in the room.
Who was going to get there first, Blake?
Oh, I remember that joke. I've got the memory of a
goldfish, not an
elephant.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like elephants and camels. I mean, maybe there were probably camels back then. But anyway, bottom line, this elephant comes walking in. First of all, if you've never seen an elephant in the scale of a 2,500 seat auditorium, the dang things are huge.
Yeah.
They are just massive. And especially in a church building, you're just like, oh my God, here we go. And then, a decent sized church building, it still looks huge. And so it comes walking in. But then what they don't tell you about elephants is how bad they smell. And it's like, at first the whole audience gasps because, you know, the elephant walks in the room and it's like, oh, it's an elephant. And then they all just start gagging across the whole place. It's like, oh, you know, it's like that. So that was one for me. It wasn't a disaster, but that was pretty wild. That was pretty out there.
I'm just glad this story didn't end with the elephant running into the crowd, because that would have been my main concern.
Yeah. Golly. You know, have you seen the video? There's a video out there. I'm not sure if it's of an elephant. Maybe it's of a donkey or something. But there's a video out there, maybe like in meme world, of an elephant or some large animal sitting down on an audience member. Have you seen this?
No.
Wow.
This sounds amazing.
No, it did happen somewhere. It was like, you know, just crazy Jesus moment or whatever. But like this elephant like walks into church and like just sits down, clears out the whole section. The whole section moves faster than you've ever seen a group of people move.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
That happens when Blake comes in and sits down in a room as well.
Yeah, they all run as fast as they can to come see me.
The smell and everything.
You beat me. I was going to say that's what our church tech friends do when Toby visits them. Okay, so you said you had a second disaster story.
Yeah. So a year ago, we were on I hate to even say what show it was. Shouldn't say it. We were on a big show.
Okay.
And one of the technicians so they had a video wall. I'm trying to set this up right. So they had a video wall upstage that could, was hung underneath a piece of truss that obviously the truss could move. And one of the technicians took a Sockapex and plugged it into the motor distro. I think is how this went.
We're going to nod and say we totally follow along with that.
Yes, it was a Sockapex cable that they thought was for the video wall power. Okay,
as one does.
So Sockapex is a 6-circuit. If you don't know what a Sockapex is, it's a 6-circuit cable. It gives you 6 extension cords in one cable. Think of that, okay? And it's got multi-pin, and you plug it in, spin the ring, which locks it in, and then you flip the breakers typically on the front of your distro, and that turns on those 6 lines. Mm-hmm. Very simple. It sounds simple. It's really cool piece of equipment, actually. It's been around for years. Anyway, bottom line, Sockapex. Well, what he didn't realize is that this Sockapex didn't go to the video wall at all, but it was labeled with the same color. Okay. And he plugs this thing in, and it actually is the control for the motors that are above the video wall. And the motors all of a sudden turn on and start running down.
Oh, this was an unplanned movement.
Right. And so at this point, everybody's going around, hey, shut off the wall, turn off the motor controller, shut off the power. So the riggers go and shut off all of their equipment, and the motors are still running.
Oof.
How is this happening? Well, it was because it was plugged into the video distro. And so 5 minutes later, the video wall, not even 5 minutes, 2 minutes later, the video wall hits the ground, then does one of these and just slides. The whole bottom of it just slides out from under it. Wow. And it just smashes into the ground.
Oh.
and we're all yelling like, stop the power, turn off the power, kill the mains.
Yeah.
It's like one of those.
Dang. Did the wall survive?
It was I think it was a 60-footer. Yeah. Luckily, I don't know what brand of panel this was, but I think they only had 3 panels that were actually broken.
Wow.
That panel brand needs to do a commercial on that story.
Serious.
Wow.
Yeah. But man, what a freaky moment. Like nobody knows where the power's coming from. And those chains sat there and ran for another 5 minutes. Maybe 10 minutes, actually. Now I'm thinking back on it. Probably about 10 minutes. They just sat there and ran. I don't know, as long, the chains can only run for so long, right?
Yeah.
But anyway, they ran, and then they finally realized, oh, this one Sockapex in the video distro got plugged in, and that's the motors.
Man, those chains kind of sound like Toby's mouth. They just keep running, and you just don't know what's power in it.
Blake, my mouth.
Tony, I'm glad you didn't get hurt in that story. Okay, so give us a tech takeaway.
I was just programming on that show, so I had nothing to do with hanging any of it. But
yes. Well, man, give us a tech takeaway for this, other than don't let your video wall get thrown on the ground, and watch where you plug things into. What would you say to a room full of our tech director pals to kind of give them word of encouragement or advice or wisdom or knowledge, any of that kind of stuff?
Man, first of all, I don't envy your job, and you guys are really amazing people to do what you do week after week after week after week after week. It's not easy work. And if nobody has told you lately, you're really good at your job, and that's not an easy job. So good for you. There you go. That's my little word of encouragement.
I love that.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's a lot of people, guys and gals out there that need more encouragement. They really do. Because what they do week to week is not easy work. It's actually very, very hard, and they're doing it on a shoestring. And it's one of those things, man. I couldn't even imagine. I couldn't do it. I physically couldn't do it. I've been asked to work at a few churches over the years, and I've never, ever, ever been able to take on the job fully. The workload, once I really examine it, unpack it, I've never been able to do it.
Look at that. This man is doing lighting design for One Republic, and he's like, I can do that. I cannot work at a church. Like, if that doesn't speak to every church tech, if you're listening to this right now, you just pat yourself on the back. You're a baller. Well, Tony, really appreciate you coming on, man. What would you like to plug? I'm sure there are some people who would love to reach out. Yeah, don't plug, what is it, into the wall?
Yeah, the
thingy-mabob.
Oh,
don't plug the coccyx into the video thingy. And
but in terms of reaching out to you, for you to be hired, what would you like to plug?
Oh, man, I'm not plugging anything. I love the church, and I want you guys all to be successful and do what you're doing. And I really do like what y'all are doing, especially helping churches sell their gear, move their gear, do the things that they do. So, I mean, I think it's just, I'm just glad to be here. I'm not plugging anything. If you guys need somebody to plug something, call Daniel Cannell, DC Pro. Or my friends at E2I, either one of those guys. Those are some amazing guys that are doing some great work out there in the world. But now, as far as me, no, I'm just happy to be here. And if you guys ever need help with some, just give me a shout. I'm on Instagram and Facebook and all the other places you can find me.
Love it. That's the first time one of our guests has plugged a different one of our guests. So
used his plug for somebody else. What a guy. Tony, well, man, we really appreciate you coming on, and we're really glad that we got to hear some of those stories. Thanks, man.
Yeah, anytime. And thank you for having me. I really enjoyed it. And I'm sorry it took us so long to get connected and get it set up.
Oh, no, that's just how content goes. It all happens eventually.
Cool.
Thanks for hanging out with us. We hope to see you back next week for more absurd stories, tech takeaways, and overall buffoonery here at the Church Gear Studios.
Okay, Blake, I feel like we need to talk about the elephant in the room.
All right. Is it the big fat raise you're giving me for Christmas?
No.
Right next to my big fat Christmas bonus?
Definitely not. It's
right next to my big fat butt.
It's the smell coming from your big fat butt.
Well, I did have a full pitcher of smoothie today, so...
Yeah, and I was joking with Reese before we started this episode that what if we put a laxative in there and just halfway through the episode, you're like, ugh.
I think that would be really bad. Because a smoothie in and of itself, with as much spinach as I put in there, it's basically a laxative.
Mm-hmm. That is one thing you should not share about on social media is if you have a laxative in your smoothie. It's like, let's just keep that stuff bottled up.
But what you shouldn't bottle up is this episode. You should share it to your friends. Find that lighting designer, lighting volunteer in your life and send it to them, if nothing else, for the encouragement that Tony had at the end. That was very nice. Share it on social, text it to them, do something, because it shouldn't stay bottled up.
And also, if you have a leg lamp at your church, take a picture and tag us on social.
Heck yeah.